Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar, run for the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as we are looking likely to see those easterly winds dominate through much of this upcoming working week. The air masses though that we see will fluctuate quite a lot, from moderate to average kind of air masses in and around the 0 degree mark at 850 HPA to potentially something a little bit stronger, a little bit more cold towards the latter part of the week. The UKV suggesting perhaps even the -10 isotherm could move in for a time. Now at the moment, in the next week or so, we're not expecting any major cold pools coming our way. These are very localised, small cold pools that are altering in intensity between different runs. So I wouldn't take any exact values we see from the UKV as gospel, but it does give a good indication that temperatures will be fluctuating massively over the next week from, as I said, average temperatures, 6-7 degrees by day, down to maybe 1 or 2 degrees by day when the more intense cold pools move through. Of course, that will affect what type of precipitation we see. We will see more rain, we will see a more wintry mix, and we most likely will see further snowfall, perhaps more widespread snowfall later on in the week. However, the real interest does come as we head towards Valentine's Day and the following week. We could be looking at something quite a bit more severe and more sustained in terms of a colder pattern. Now, as I said over the past few videos, the past week or so even, it has been very uncertain within the runs. However, the last 24 hours, or pretty much since yesterday's video, we have seen quite a substantial shift within the models. Not necessarily any specific outcome changing, but it's the confidence has changed quite a lot. We have actually seen quite a substantial shift towards those colder solutions, from especially the ensembles, where we're now, instead of seeing 20 or 30% going for these colder outcomes, we're looking at more like 50 or 60%. Not a guarantee, but a definite shift that something has triggered within the models to suggest the colder pattern could be much more likely than we thought a couple of days ago. And we'll show you some of those charts in the second half video. They do look very, very cold indeed. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. And remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if you start on the live radar, you can see those easterly winds are continuing through this weekend. We have seen this small-scale low that has moved up from France. That has given some more persistent precipitation, especially last night. That is now continuing across parts of northern England. It has got a bit of milder air wrapped in within it. That's why we're not seeing too much in the way of snow, apart from some of the higher ground there across the Peak District. It's cold, it's 4, 5, 6 degrees, but rain is falling. As I said, those slightly milder upper air temperatures, only by a couple of degrees, makes all the difference. Instead of it being 1 or 2 degrees with some snow, potentially what we could have seen if we did have lower dew points and a slightly colder air mass, we're instead seeing it slightly higher. As I said though, later on into this upcoming week, it could become less marginal and more likely to be in the way of snow. But regardless of those exact upper air temperatures, it feels very cold and miserable out there at the moment. You can see across the east and the southeast, it is mildest. Temperatures, as I said, 5, 6, maybe 7 degrees at best. Further northwards and westwards, colder with less cloud, less precipitation, and less of that slightly milder air. But wherever you are, regardless of what the exact 2-metre temperature is, the wind chill makes it feel like it's 1 or 2 at best. Those winds streaming in off the cold North Sea, it feels much colder than it actually is at the moment, and that will continue, as I said, over the coming days. Now, if you go over to the latest UKV, you can see all of that precipitation moving in through this morning. As I said, a bit of snow on its leading edge and over the higher ground of the Peak District, but it's slowly fizzling away with that slight milder sector moving through. As we progress through Sunday, though, the winds will veer more east to northeasterly instead of southeasterly, so we'll actually see another cold pool pushing in, and that could bring the risk of even colder air. And of course, the risk of some further snow, especially in the north through Monday. And of course, further inland, where that air mass is slightly cold and not having the effects of the slight milding effects of those of the North Sea. Through the rest of Monday, we do see more showers turning quite extensive. Again, wintriness in places, but not clear-cut. And then as we progress into Tuesday, slightly drier, as we do see a bit of a drier slot. those winds turn a bit slack, but later in the week they could get stronger once again. Wednesday into Thursday, look at this, another big batch of showers, but interestingly, more of these are snow. And as I said earlier in the video, we could see a more intense cold pull pushing through later on this week, Thursday into Friday. At the moment, not got massive confidence in the exact details of it. As I said, it is a small cold pull. This is not a huge Arctic blast like we could see potentially within the next week or two. This is, as I said, a more localized system, a more local cold pull, which means it's very, very difficult to forecast. But if it did occur, like the UKV is suggesting, then there would be widespread heavy snow showers, and it would all be falling as snow. There would be no marginality within this. And the reason for that is if we look at the upper air temperatures, down to -10 to -12 degrees coming in across the east. As I said, though, it is a more marginal cold pull to the south across France, only -5. Further northwards, you can see it across parts of the North Sea back down to -5. So it is a very localised area of very cold air. But if it did occur, then we could see, at least for a few days, some very, very cold conditions. Now you can see at the moment that slight milder sector in the far southeast, still below freezing at 850 HPA, but just not the -7, -8 degrees that we were seeing yesterday. That will eventually clear through, and we'll see slightly colder air arriving into Sunday, and then a larger colder pull starts to pull back in from the North Sea. And you can just see we are oscillating between cold, very cold air in places, and just chilly air, and that means it's going to be very difficult to forecast those temperatures and exact precipitation typings. But regardless, it is going to feel very cold pretty much everywhere. Later on Monday, another larger area of cold air pulls in, and then another slightly milder sector there through Tuesday into Wednesday, and then that very cold pull arrives there on Thursday. You can see we're oscillating, as I said, between chilly air and cold air, and it is very, very difficult as these are very subtle changes in the wind direction and how these air masses form across the near continent make all the difference to what we see at the surface. So still quite a lot of uncertainty over the coming days, but you can roughly see what we are expecting. No major disruption, but we are expecting it to continue to be really chilly, if not cold in places, and the risk of snow could increase as we spread through the week. All dependent, though, on the intensities of these easterly winds. As I said, the biggest limiting factor at the moment for wintriness is the dew points. You can see the dew points are above freezing across much of England and Wales through the rest of today, and even into Sunday they'll remain above freezing, reducing the risk of any snow. As I said, this is all because we've got a slight southeasterly tilt to the flow, drawing up some slightly milder sectors of air in from the Mediterranean. As we progress, though, into Monday, Tuesday, those dew points lower once again, and as we head into Wednesday and Thursday, dew points getting well below freezing, which does, as I said, decrease that marginality, and that's why we start to see widespread snowfall within that precipitation as we head into the latter part of the week. Now, do look at the 2 metre temperatures, regardless of the exact upper air temperatures, it is, as I said, going to be cold all of the week. This afternoon, temperatures peaking around 1 to maybe 7 degrees, but of course feeling much colder than that. And I would be surprised if actually did up to 7 or 8 in the far southeast, given the amount of cloud and drizzle we've got around at the moment, really holding those temperatures down. Into Sunday, risk of a frost in a few spots, but it all depends on whether we see the skies clear. Into Sunday, more widespread 5 to 8 degrees, still average to below average, just not quite as cold as the recent days have been. And then we progress into Monday, a cold morning, but nothing too spectacular, of frost in the north, and by the afternoon, temperatures not rising much, 3, 4, maybe 5. At best. Tuesday, similar conditions, well below average, 1 to 5 degrees, and then as we progress into Wednesday, more of a widespread frost into the morning, and then temperatures further struggling around that 1 to 5 degree mark, and I suggest into Thursday it will be much, much colder, widespread frost overnight, and I wouldn't be surprised those temperatures didn't get much above 1 to 3 degrees come the afternoon. So you can see it is going to be really chilly, cold next 5 days, but as we'll see now from the main runs, something a bit more severe could be arriving later on. So we do start on the latest GFS, the 6 o'clock run. The GFS has been one of those that has had a substantial shift in the past 24 hours towards something much, much colder. Typically, just as I'm recording this, the 6 o'clock run has fully come out, and the ensembles have fully come out, and it is slightly milder than the previous few runs. So it doesn't quite show that substantial shift, or as much of a substantial shift as we anticipated this morning, but it has still got a very cold pattern trying to develop. It just struggles with it a little bit more than some of the prior runs. So if these easterlies continue over the coming days, again, we won't concentrate on them too much. We've looked at in the UKV in a lot of detail. Eventually, though, the high pressure moves to our north later on next week, and this is where the UKV does try and pull in that very cold air mass from the east. You can see the GFS has a chilly air mass there, but nothing on the scale of the UKV, so just highlights the uncertainty even at 5 days. But all eyes are on this darker blues towards the north of Scandinavia. This is a low tropospheric vortex. That is where very cold air is, and it starts to get drawn into Europe. See, the isobars are drawing into Europe, and for the UK, it actually starts to head our way. As I said, this latest GFS run, the 6 o'clock, does struggle with it a little bit. It gets agonisingly close to getting fully pulled in, but it doesn't quite come off, and it gets slowly pushed away. Still goes very cold, especially for the north, and there would be a widespread snow risk with these Atlantic fronts bumping into that cold air, but it wouldn't be a severe, prolonged cold run like some other runs have been showing. But it's still very similar, and still is very close to pulling off proper beastly easterlies there come the end of the run. Again, a beast from the east, a proper beast from the east. We're looking at that -15 isotherm, which doesn't quite get in, but it is just across the North Sea in Scandinavia, Denmark, and Eastern Europe. Very, very close by there into the middle portion of February. If we do just compare to the midnight run, just to show you what was occurring this morning, you can see that easterly is much, much stronger, and you see the -15 line gets much closer, and the -10 pulls in for all. So it's not a massive shift between the runs, but just slightly reduced strength in the blocking for the latest 6 o'clock run. It doesn't push that -10 isotherm and even -15 isotherm as far across the British Isles. So still a very cold run, just not quite as severe and prolonged. As you can see, this run really only clears the -5 isotherm come the 21st, 22nd of February, so a good week plus of very cold conditions. So yeah, very interesting today. You can see it could turn exceptionally cold. You can see these pinks and purples indicating a ridiculously cold Arctic air, temperature deviation well below average. And if we do zoom in to the United Kingdom, look, overnight temperatures well below freezing, daytime temperatures, of course, would probably struggle to get towards ice day territories, especially in the south, because we are heading toward the latter part of February now, got longer daylight hours, the sun is a lot stronger, so it does reduce the chance of an ice day. This would definitely be an ice day in January or December, but regardless, still 1 to 3 degrees, definitely a high chance of pretty severe wintry conditions. Now, to compare to the latest GM, again, very similar over the coming days, as easterly winds are persistent. That high pressure retrogresses towards Greenland, and it attempts to pull in that easterly. Doesn't have as much success, though. The very cold air gets very close, but the southwesterlies win out. So this is what we were seeing from more of the runs over the past few days. Not all of them, but this was a more substantial solution. So it does show you it is still within the model outputs, even though we have seen that shift towards something a lot colder. So you need to keep a close eye. This is what could occur on the other end of the spectrum. These are the milder runs, what the GM is showing here, what the GFS has shown, especially the midnight run. That is the colder solution. So we can see both ends of the spectrum here, and you can see synoptically, they're not too different. It's just that block to our north is much weaker on the GM compared to the GFS. It's all down to how strong that block is towards Greenland, Iceland, and of course how that interacts with these oncoming lows from the jet stream. Now, do you finally compare to the latest eastern low? This is the midnight run. Those easterlies continue over the coming days to varying degrees of intensity. And then later on next week, you can see we still got those easterlies pushing in. Again, nowhere near as intense in terms of the air mass as the UKV. Again, it could just be the UKV seeing something different, or it could just be the UKV is high resolution, so picking up on some small-scale cold pools that these larger runs, operational runs, more lower resolution runs are not seeing. So still got uncertainty even in the next 5 days, but very similar to the other runs. So that retrogression of the high, and we do start to put in those easterly winds. It still is a big battle, though. Very similar to the GFS 6 o'clock run. It doesn't get the -10, -15 isotherm in, or even the minus 20 degree isotherm, which is lingering across Russia. But it does get cold enough air in that we would see wintry hazards. We would see these weather fronts bumping into that cold air. The minus 10 isotherm does eventually get in around the 18th of Feb, and it does try and have a dominant spell, but the jet stream is slightly too strong to fully pull in beastly easterlies. That would be these proper easterly winds. It does come in for a short period of time, but no sustained easterlies, because eventually the jet stream does win out. So you can see varying degrees of intensity from the operational runs today. The GEM, probably the mildest run, still cold at least in the next week, but milder longer term. The GFX 6 o'clock run is very cold, just not quite as sustained as the midnight run was, and the Eastern WF run is very cold again, but it doesn't quite perhaps pull in a severe cold as some other runs are showing. So main runs today, all slightly colder, apart from perhaps the GM, than we were seeing over the past few days, but it's also the ensembles which we'll see now, which have substantially shifted. But it's more predominantly the ensembles that have massively shifted, which has given this increased confidence in something colder towards the middle of the month. So you start on the latest GFS, you can see below average over the next week or so. Definitely a shift now towards that -5 line. We were seeing a few runs, especially yesterday and the day before, that had it more around the average line. So definitely get a colder shift today. So just slight alterations in that wind direction, meaning the air mass is a few degrees colder. Some runs were even showing 10 degrees yesterday or the day before for Sunday, Monday. Not seeing that now, maybe a 7 or 8 on Sunday at best. Beyond that though, as we progress towards Valentine's Day and beyond, we do see massive uncertainty, but there are a substantial shift towards colder runs there, around that 14th to 20th of February point. As I said, the 6 o'clock run has actually shifted a bit milder than some of the earlier runs, but nonetheless, it still has shown a lot of very severe runs. Those -15 lines, those are proper beastly easterlies. You can see only a handful get there, but regardless, still quite a few. If you do run back just to the midnight run, just to compare, you can see there was even more runs down towards that -10 to -15 isotherm. So as I said, a slight warm-up from the 6 o'clock ensemble run, but I must stress that ensemble runs are going to shift. It's the overall average between all of these runs which has given us the increased confidence. So you can go back to the 6 o'clock run last night, look at that, another big cluster around that -10 to -14 degree mark, and the midday run, again, another larger cluster starting to appear. So you can see all of the latest 4 runs, all different, but they're all starting to show a larger cluster there around that severe cold sort of area. There are still milder runs, those are the runs that will be similar to the GM, but they are decreasing in confidence. I do think the next couple of days will be the most important period for knowing how this colder spell will go. If those colder runs continue to increase in confidence, then I think, yes, we could be looking at quite a severe spell for a period of time. Intensity and, of course, longevity still all up in the air, as all of these runs do have different ways of exactly pulling in that very cold air. But once we get the confidence in that block decided, that's when we can start to have a look at potentially what sort of snow we could be seeing, the exact air masses, temperatures, things like that. If you compare just finally to the ECMWF, you can see another quite a big shift there towards colder patterns, especially the operational run there, exemplary within that colder cluster. So you can see that operational ECMWF was very cold, as we saw, but it's got a lot of support. There's a lot of runs in and around it. There's still those milder runs, but there is a substantial shift there, as I said, around the 14th to the 18th for these colder runs to appear. You see the 2 meter temperatures are very cold within some of these runs, low single digits at best, well below freezing overnight, and yeah, would make all the difference. If you just go back to the GFS, I just want to show you the dew points. Again, those runs going down to -5 to -10, that is true brutally cold air, and you can see a larger cluster is starting to appear, and I suspect if we go back to the midnight run, an even larger cluster appears there. So definitely increased confidence in a potentially severe colder spell coming up into the middle to second half of February. But at the moment, still some milder runs like the GM, so we'll have to wait and see. But if you are looking forward to another colder spell, then definitely some good news today. But if you're looking for perhaps some early spring-like weather, then this is not good news. Definitely looks like if we see a Greenland high like this, it could get very cold and potentially sustained cold if it really does get going. Because once these cold air masses get into Eastern Europe, get into Central Europe, then any easterly or northeasterly push, which could occur at very short notice, would be very, very cold. The big reason why we're not very cold at the moment is because that cold pool is not there across Europe. But a lot of these runs, regardless if they do pull in the cold air for the UK, get that cold pull into Europe. So it does mean that for the next few weeks, probably for the rest of February, whenever we see any easterly, northeasterly, northerly wind, it is going to go very, very cold. So we'll wait and see exactly how it does occur, but we've definitely got a substantial shift towards a colder solution today, and of course I'll keep you updated over the coming days. Especially, as I said, there could even be some very cold weather coming up later on this working week, but just a lot of still uncertainty over that. It all depends on those very small areas of very cold air. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.